The vibration against my leg didn't feel like just another phone notification. It felt like a shiver through my soul. Like the universe had nudged me, just once, hard enough to throw me off balance. I froze, right in the middle of fastening the clasp of my antique sapphire brooch, the one my late husband, Robert, had given me on our 30th anniversary. A piece I never wore unless the day truly demanded joy. Today was meant to be one of those days. I was 72, standing in the hallway of the house I had polished to a shine since dawn. I wore my navy silk dress, the one my son Daniel once said made me look like a movie star from the 50s. His words. I remember laughing and blushing like a schoolgirl that day. The scent of warm blueberry crumble wafted from the kitchen. The grandkids adored it. Every time I made it, they'd hover like little bees around the oven, begging to lick the spoon. I could hear their laughter just thinking of it. But when I finally glanced at my phone, that sweetness in the air curdled. A text. From Andrew Bennett, my accountant of over 2 decades. The man had never, in all our years, contacted me on a Sunday. Not even once. The message was chilling in its brevity. Margaret, call me now. Do not drive. Do not go to Daniel's house. Emergency. My fingers, usually so precise they could still thread a needle without glasses, trembled. The phone slipped from my hands and smacked the floor with a sharp, final clatter. I stared at it, afraid to touch it, like it might bite. The clock on the wall ticked louder than I'd ever heard it, counting down to what should have been a family celebration. A warm lunch. Stories. Hugs. I had spent the entire week looking forward to this. I picked up the phone with shaking hands and hit call. Andrew picked up before it even rang once. Margaret, he said, his voice stripped bare of its usual professional calm. You need to sit down. There was a long, tense pause. Then he added, what I'm about to tell you, it's going to break something inside you. But it's better you hear it in your own home. Not at that table. I sat on the bench by the door, the one Robert had built with his own hands. The wood felt suddenly cold. Sharp. Andrew exhaled, a sound full of dread. 3 days ago, Daniel came into the firm. He didn't know I was your senior advisor. Our arrangement was always confidential. He met with a junior associate to draft legal documents. My heart was already sinking. He's prepared full asset transfer paperwork. Power of attorney claiming you're suffering from early onset dementia. He's got a deed ready to transfer your home for a laughable $10 and authorization to liquidate your retirement accounts. I felt my lungs forget how to breathe. My hallway went silent, eerily silent. No ticking, no hum of the fridge, just a vacuum of betrayal. Dementia. I whispered, the words sour on my tongue. I just finished the Sunday crossword in ink, Andrew. I know, Margaret. I know. But the papers are drawn up. He and his wife, Monica, plan to have you sign them today. At lunch. They're calling it estate planning. They've even arranged a notary. He didn't need to finish. I understood. By Monday, I would be penniless, homeless, declared legally unfit to make my own decisions. Before I go on, please, if you're still here, like this video and listen to my story till the end. And tell me, which city are you listening from? I want to know how far my voice, my warning, can reach. I looked around at the pictures lining my foyer. Daniel's baby photo. His high school graduation. Him holding his first child. The same smile I once adored now twisted into something I didn't recognize. I had sacrificed for that boy. When Robert died 15 years ago, I buried half of my soul with him. I worked night shifts at the library, took in sewing. I skipped vacations, skipped meals. I even sold Robert's rare coin collection, all to ensure Daniel could finish his MBA debt-free. And now, He was planning to erase me, to stage a quiet heist of everything I had built after becoming a widow. Andrew's voice broke again through the phone. He sounded furious. I stopped the paperwork before anything could be submitted. But he thinks it's all ready to go. He thinks he's walking into a celebration today. I stood. My legs trembled, but they held me. The kitchen smelled like warmth, but I no longer felt welcome in my own plans. By the door were the gift bags I'd made for the twins, each with hand-knitted sweaters. My fingers ached from those hours, but I had smiled through every stitch. And today, I was dressed in silk and sapphires, ready to play the gracious matriarch. While my son had scripted me as the unsuspecting victim, I walked slowly to the hallway mirror. The woman looking back at me didn't look senile. She looked devastated. She looked like a mother blindsided by her own blood. But even more, she looked like someone who had just awoken from a dangerous dream. What would you do if you got that message from your accountant? Would you still go to that lunch? Or would you fight back? Let me tell you what happened next in part 2. I didn't know how long I stood in front of that mirror, staring at a reflection that felt like a stranger. The lines around my eyes seemed deeper. Not from age, but from disappointment. And beneath the surface, rage simmered. Not the kind that makes you scream. No. This was the quiet, slow-burning kind that changes something fundamental in your bones. The phone buzzed again. Daniel. I stared at his name, the one Robert and I had chosen in a hospital room filled with laughter and tears. I remembered whispering it to his tiny ears, over and over. Daniel. Daniel. My sweet boy. Now it felt like poison. I let the call ring once. Twice. By the third ring, I pressed the side button and silenced it. I couldn't listen to his voice. Not right now. If I heard that manipulative tone, the one he used whenever he wanted something, I was afraid I'd either scream or vomit. Seconds later, a text appeared. Mom, where are you? The kids are asking for you. Monica made your favorite roast. Don't be late. The lie curled across the screen like smoke. Monica hadn't made that roast for me. There was no excited anticipation. No warmth. Just bait. Carefully placed bait. Waiting for me to walk right into it. I walked to the kitchen in a daze. The blueberry crumble had begun to cool on the counter. Its scent still filled the house, still trying to play the part of happiness. I stared at it for a long moment. Then, with a sudden surge of fury, I picked up the ceramic dish and dumped the entire thing into the trash. Purple filling smeared across the plastic liner like bruises. I wasn't going to serve dessert to people who came to devour me. I walked back to my bedroom, the silk dress swishing against my legs. It felt absurd now, like a costume I'd worn for a show I didn't realize was a farce. I unpinned the sapphire brooch, my hands steady now. I placed it gently back in its velvet box and closed the lid with a sharp snap. It sounded like a door slamming shut. And it was. I changed into my old gardening pants, the ones with soil stains on the knees and a loose drawstring. Pulled on an oversized sweater I hadn't worn in years. I sat in my armchair by the window, wrapped in wool and silence. Outside, the afternoon sun was fading, dipping low behind the trees. Every shadow stretching longer, darker. I waited. Half of me expected to see flashing lights. A police car sent under the guise of concern. Or worse, Daniel's SUV pulling into the driveway, with Monica in her heels, clipboard in hand, ready to talk me into oblivion. But no one came. Instead, the house sat quiet. Too quiet. My phone buzzed again. A long string of calls and texts. Mom, are you okay? Mom, we're worried. Please call. If you don't answer, we're coming over. Their concern felt performative. Convenient. Urgent only because their plan was unraveling. My fingers hovered over the screen. And then I typed. I'm not feeling well. A stomach bug. Turning off my phone to rest. Don't come over. I'm contagious. A weak lie, but one that gave me breathing room. And silence. I sat there in the dimming room, the walls hugging me like old friends. I wasn't afraid of the silence anymore. I was afraid of what love had made me blind to. I didn't cry over the money, or even the house. I cried for something far worse, the death of the son I thought I had. Daniel wasn't a monster. Not exactly. But he had let desperation rot his morals. He had buried his integrity under a mountain of debt and bad choices. And somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as a person. I was just a means to an end. The next morning, Monday, I rose early and dressed like a woman on a mission. The sky was a moody gray, the kind that presses against your skin like a warning. I drove into downtown, weaving through traffic with a calm that surprised me. I wasn't nervous. I was done being afraid. Arthur's office was on the 40th floor of a steel and glass tower. He looked tired when he greeted me. There were dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept either. "Margaret," he said softly, leading me into a conference room. On the table were the papers. So many papers. I stared at them for a moment before sitting down. There it was, in black and white, the plan to erase me. The power of attorney was disgustingly thorough. It gave Daniel control over everything, my finances, my medical care, my home. He could have sold my house out from under me and signed me into a facility with no windows. My hands shook as I flipped through each document. Then I saw the line. Transfer of property for love and affection, and other valuable consideration. I laughed. A bitter, painful sound. Love and affection. The language of betrayal dressed up like poetry. Arthur slid another stack toward me. "There's more," he said. My heart clenched. "Margaret, I did some digging. It's worse than we thought." I looked up, my voice dry. "How?" He hesitated. "They're in debt. Deep. Nearly $80,000 in credit cards. Behind on their mortgage. But 2 months ago they applied for a business loan." I blinked. "Using what collateral?" "Your house," he said quietly. "They forged your signature." The bank flagged it and denied the application, but didn't report it. Most banks don't unless a victim presses charges. I couldn't breathe. That house was mine. Robert and I had poured our life into it. The garden, the porch swing, the memories. Daniel and Monica hadn't just planned to take it. They had already tried. "What do I do, Arthur?" My voice broke for the first time. He looked at me gently. "You can go to the police. This is fraud. Grand larceny. Elder abuse." I shook my head. "And put my son in prison?" "You wouldn't be wrong if you did." "I'd still be broken." He nodded. "Then we protect you," he said. "We move everything into an irrevocable trust. Change your will. Alert the banks. Freeze everything they could touch." My voice turned sharp. "Do it." Arthur gave me a small smile. "Also," I said, "I want to change my will. Everything goes to the Chicago Literacy Alliance." He blinked. "That's a beautiful choice." For the next 4 hours, I signed away my past to protect my future. Every signature was a boundary, a declaration, a shield. By the time I walked out of that building, I was legally untouchable. But emotionally, I was splintered. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, the wind slapped my cheeks. Mothers passed me with strollers, adjusting blankets, pressing kisses to soft baby foreheads. And I wanted to shout, "Don't give them everything. Don't bleed for them, or they'll grow up thinking your blood is free." But I didn't say a word. I walked back to my car. The silence inside was deafening. But it was safe. Part 3 is where everything shifts. What happens when Daniel is finally confronted? Do you think he apologizes or manipulates his way out again? Stay tuned. It only gets more intense from here. I didn't reach out. I didn't send an explanation or a warning. Let them squirm, I thought. Let them wonder. I stayed quiet, my phone silenced, my house still. For 3 long days. By Wednesday, I could only imagine the panic building. Monica pacing their marble-floored kitchen. Daniel checking his phone every 5 minutes, rehearsing the charm in his voice for when I finally called. But I never did. Instead, I sent him a text. Feeling better. Come over Saturday at 2 p.m. Just you. I have something important to discuss about the estate. The response was almost instant. Great, Mom. Can Monica come too? No. I replied. Just you. And then I put the phone down and didn't pick it up again. I didn't clean the house. Didn't polish the silver. Didn't bake anything. I left the dust where it danced in the sunlight and the kitchen cold. I didn't want warmth. I wanted truth. I spent the next 2 days preparing, gathering everything, bank statements showing unpaid credit cards, the denied loan application with my forged signature, and the unsigned drafts of every deceitful document Arthur had pulled together. I laid it all out in 3 neat piles on the coffee table like evidence at a trial. Saturday came cloaked in gray drizzle. Appropriate, I thought. The world was mourning too. At 2 p.m. sharp, Daniel's black SUV rolled into the driveway. From the window, I saw him fix his collar in the mirror, smooth his hair. He looked confident. He thought this was his moment, that I'd had time to calm down, that I was ready to be reasonable. He had no idea. He unlocked the door with his key, my key, and called out, "Mom!" In the living room, I said, loud and flat. He walked in with a smile so bright it could have powered the entire street. "Hey, you look great. Monica sends her love. She's so sorry she couldn't make it." "I told you not to bring her," I said, rising from my chair. Something in my voice made his smile twitch. He glanced at the coffee table and froze when he saw the papers. "What's all this?" He laughed nervously. "Taxes." "Sit down, Daniel." He obeyed, the smile dimming slightly, confusion creeping in. "You're being a little intense," he said. "Is everything okay?" I picked up the first document, the forged loan application. "Do you recognize this?" He leaned forward, squinted, and then everything changed. His face went pale. His throat moved as he swallowed hard. I don't know what that is." "Don't lie to me," I said quietly. "It's a loan application from First City Bank. It lists my house as collateral. That's my signature at the bottom. Except it isn't. And you and I both know that." He opened his mouth, but no words came. I picked up the second pile. "The power of attorney you had drawn up, declaring me unfit. The deed transfer for $10. The legal fiction about early onset dementia." He flinched. The kind of flinch people make when they're caught red-handed in a dream and suddenly realize it's real. Mom, we were desperate." He started to cry. Not the deep kind. The surface tears, the kind that hope to manipulate, not express. "We were drowning, okay? Monica's business collapsed, and the debt piled up. We were just trying to survive." "So you decided to survive by drowning me?" I asked. No, we were going to take care of you. We just needed control of the assets. We would have paid it back." I laughed, bitter and dry. "You've never paid me back. Not for the $6,000 roof that never leaked. Not for the $4,000 transmission. Not for the private school tuition. You took, and took, and I gave because I loved you. But this. I held up the stack of papers like a torch. This is theft. This is betrayal. This is calculated. Don't pretend it wasn't. He dropped his head into his hands and wept. Truly wept this time. It was a pitiful sound. But I felt nothing. I had cried for him already. The night I learned the truth. I had sobbed until my lungs gave out. I had mourned the son I thought I had. What sat before me now wasn't him. Who are you? I asked softly. Where did my Daniel go? The boy who returned a stranger's wallet without thinking. The one who cried when our dog died. Where is he? He looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. I'm still him, Mom. Life got hard. I was scared. Please, if you report this, I'll lose my license. I'll go to jail. What about the kids? The kids. The final shield of the guilty. I stood, shaking with grief more than anger now. You didn't think about the kids when you plotted to take everything from their grandmother. Don't use them now like pawns in your defense. He bowed his head, his shoulders trembling. I haven't filed charges, I said. Arthur has instructions not to. For now. His head jerked up. His face filled with cautious hope. Thank you. Oh my God, thank you. I knew. I'm not finished, I snapped. You are no longer in my will. Everything has been transferred to a trust you'll never touch. And from now on, you are not to come to this house uninvited. Ever again. I held out my hand. My key, Daniel. He stared at my palm like it was a guillotine. Mom, please don't do this. I'm your son. You're a stranger who tried to steal my life. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence between us carried all the weight. Slowly, he reached into his pocket, unhooked the key from his ring, and dropped it into my palm. It was warm. It made me shudder. Go, I said. And tell Monica this. If she ever sets foot on my property again, I'll reconsider my kindness. He stood, looking around the room, like he was memorizing it. When can I see you again? He whispered. I don't know, I said. Maybe never. Maybe in 10 years. But not now. Right now, I need to heal from the wound you gave me. He opened the door. Paused. I loved you, he said. I still do. No, Daniel, I said, steady as steel. You loved what I did for you. That's not the same. The door clicked shut behind him. I locked the deadbolt, slid the chain, and finally collapsed onto the floor and wept. Loud, raw, and guttural. The kind of weeping that only comes from betrayal that wears your face and calls you Mom. What would you have done in Margaret's place? Could you have looked your own child in the eye and said goodbye? Part 4 is coming, and it's about what healing looks like after devastation. You don't want to miss it. The house was quiet after he left. Not peaceful, just still. Like the pause between lightning and thunder. I sat on the floor for a long time, curled up like a child, my arms wrapped around my knees. My breath came in little gasps, like the sobs had rearranged my lungs. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was dull and heavy, the kind that settles into your spine and makes you move slower. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The ache in my chest was still there, but it had changed shape. Not grief, not rage, something heavier. Emptiness, maybe. I made myself tea. The blueberry crumble was gone. The silk dress was folded away, the brooch tucked back in its box. There was nothing left to perform for. For the first time in decades, I had nothing to give anyone. And that, strangely, felt like freedom. The phone stayed silent for days. I received no calls, no apologies, no explanations. Just nothing. It was like they'd accepted the loss. Like I'd died and they had already moved on. But I hadn't died. I was still here. And if I was going to keep breathing, I needed something to hold on to. Arthur had once mentioned a support group for people like me, victims of financial abuse. At the time, I'd brushed it off. I didn't want to sit in some church basement with strangers swapping sad stories over weak coffee. But now I needed to be in a room where people wouldn't look at me with pity or disbelief. I went that Tuesday night, drove myself, wore simple clothes. I stood in front of the church doors for a full 5 minutes, fingers trembling, before I walked in. I expected silence when I opened the door. But the room was warm, bright, full. There were at least 20 people there, some older, some younger, all carrying the same invisible weight. I sat in the back at first, just listening. A man spoke about his daughter stealing his retirement fund. Another woman talked about her brother forging her signature on a home equity loan. And then it hit me. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't weak. I wasn't naive. I was simply someone who loved too hard, and someone else used that love as leverage. After the meeting, a petite woman with sharp eyes and a short gray bob came up to me. She had the kind of smile that made you feel like you'd known her forever. "I'm Helen," she said. "First time." I nodded. She reached into her purse and pulled out a little business card. "Come have coffee with me. There's a diner around the corner. No pressure." I followed her. We sat in a red booth with cracked vinyl seats and sipped terrible coffee that somehow tasted perfect in that moment. "My daughter convinced me to co-sign a loan," she said, stirring in sugar. "Said she was opening a bakery. She took the money to Vegas." She laughed. It wasn't bitter. It was almost amused. "It hurts," she said. "It's like an emotional amputation. But you learn to walk again. You survive." We sat for 2 hours, just talking. And for the first time in months, I felt seen. Please, if you're still here with me, tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Helen and I started having lunch every Thursday. Then we started taking watercolor classes at the community center. I'd never painted before. I always assumed I wasn't the creative type. But there was something about dragging a wet brush across paper, watching colors bloom, that made me feel calm. I painted forests, oceans, stormy skies, places untouched by betrayal. One day, in the middle of class, Helen nudged me. "That woman over there," she whispered. "Her name's Beatrice. She's my neighbor. Best gardener you'll ever meet." I smiled and waved. Beatrice waved back. A week later, she was in my yard, snipping away at my rose bushes with confidence. "You're pruning them too gently," she said, clicking her shears. "You've got to cut the dead wood aggressively if you want new growth." I looked at her, and something clicked inside me. "Yes," I said softly. "I suppose you do." The three of us became a little trio. We called ourselves the Survivors Club. It started as a joke, but the name stuck. We had potluck dinners and wine on Helen's porch. We shared stories, laughed until we cried until we laughed again. Thanksgiving came. No turkey, no chaos, just soup, candles, and the kind of laughter that comes from knowing you've been broken and survived. I learned that family doesn't always come from blood. Sometimes it walks into your life in a support group, or sits next to you in a painting class, or appears in your garden with a pair of shears and no judgment. I was healing, But grief has long roots. It had been 6 months since that day. Since Daniel gave me back my key. Since I looked my son in the eye and saw a stranger. I missed my grandchildren. I won't pretend I didn't. That was the price I paid to keep my soul intact. One quiet afternoon, I was in the grocery store. I reached for a bag of oranges and looked up. And there she was. Monica. Her hair was pulled back. Her roots showed. Her face looked thinner, tired. She froze when she saw me. And for a second I felt that old pull, that instinct to ask about the kids, to offer help, to smile and pretend we were two women who still shared something real. But I didn't. I stood tall, met her eyes, and gave a polite, firm nod. Then I turned my cart and walked toward the bakery aisle. I bought myself a blueberry muffin. I walked out into the winter sunshine, and for the first time in over a year, I felt light. Coming up in part 5, Margaret makes one final decision that will change her future. Not out of revenge, but out of renewal. The story isn't over yet. The best part is still to come. Spring arrived quietly. The kind of spring that doesn't shout with color but whispers it. Pale green buds. The soft return of birdsong. The smell of earth beginning to forgive the winter. I spent my mornings in the garden, hands deep in soil, tugging weeds, trimming back what didn't belong. Every cut I made, I whispered to myself, not this, not anymore. It became a ritual. My neighbor Beatrice was teaching me how to prune with precision. Not just hack things away, but shape the plants for new growth. It was slow, meditative work. You have to know where the dead ends are, she said one morning, snipping a branch. Cutting them off doesn't hurt the plant. It saves it. I stared at her, a lump rising in my throat. That day, I went back inside and opened a box I hadn't touched in months. Letters from Daniel. Photos of the grandkids. A baby blanket I'd knitted during Monica's first pregnancy. I ran my fingers across the fabric, soft and familiar. The color was fading, but the memory was still vibrant. I didn't cry. I just sat with it. And then, gently, I placed the items back in the box, closed the lid, and wrote a label on top in soft pencil. For later. Not now. I had forgiven them, in part. Not for their choices, but for the weight they'd unknowingly added to my life. Carrying that kind of pain around every day wasn't noble. It was exhausting. I chose to put it down. Not for them. For me. A week later, I was back at the library. I'd started volunteering during story hour, reading to children, helping them pick their next favorite book, tying tiny shoelaces, accepting crayon drawings with dramatic flair. One little girl, maybe 6 years old, handed me a drawing of a woman with gray hair, holding a giant blue heart. That's you, she said, grinning. You have grandma energy. I laughed so hard, I nearly spilled my tea. Is that a compliment? I teased. She nodded seriously. The best kind. That evening, I hung that drawing on my fridge. It was the first thing I'd chosen to display in a long time. Helen, Beatrice, and I were having dinner on my back porch that Friday. Pasta, wine, candles, the scent of tomato and garlic still clinging to the air. I like this version of you, Helen said, swirling her glass. You've got steel in your spine now. Not steel, I said, smiling. Roots. I'm finally rooted. Beatrice clinked her fork against her glass and lifted it toward me. To Margaret. For choosing herself. We laughed and toasted, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a character in someone else's story. I felt like the author. A few days later, I received a letter. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Daniel. Inside was a card. No plea. No excuses. Just a short sentence. If you ever want to see them, I will respect your boundaries. That was all. I didn't respond. But I didn't throw it away either. I tucked it into the same box with the baby blanket and the letters, still labeled, "For later." Not now. Because healing isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming what was taken, and choosing where to go from here. I had already made my choice. This house was mine. My name. My story. The days that followed were simple, quiet, beautiful. Mornings in the garden. Afternoons at the library. Evenings with friends who had walked through their own fires and come out softer, not bitter. And every night, I would sip tea on the porch and whisper 3 words to myself. I am enough. That became my peace. My new life wasn't flashy. It wasn't filled with applause or grand gestures. But it was real. It was earned. And it was mine. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone tried to tear it down? If you've experienced something like this, share your story. You are not alone. And don't forget, subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because there's strength in surviving. But there's even more in starting again. As the stars blinked over Chicago and the city hummed below, I sat on that porch, wrapped in an old blanket, a cup of tea warm in my hands, and I smiled. I had lost a son, but I had found myself. And for the first time, that felt like more than enough.